it's a quid pro quo thing. We trade each other.
You each trash each other's work.
Yes. Every movie is a suspense movie. During a basketball game, his shorts accidentally fall down, and he's totally exposed, and he's very well.
Today, we are sending you to film school. Neil Landau, author of 101 Things I Learned in Film School, is here. Pleasure to meet you, Neil.
Pleasure to meet you.
So I enjoyed reading the book, and I should say, by the way, you actually also teach at UCLA.
I teach an MFA screenwriting. I've been teaching there since probably 1996 or 97.
All right, well, you are the expert. So you're teaching the film school and you wrote the book. I guess one question people have, though, is do you need to go to film school? Can I just read your book and that's it?
It's a good question. I think the best thing you get out of film school that you can't really get out of a book or watching an instructional video or just studying films is the best thing you get out of it is all the networking opportunities.
Sure, yeah.
It's the people you meet. Some people will become the leaders and the directors that will come to the forefront. Other people might end up crewing for you, or they might write write something that aspiring directors might want to direct. A lot of my friends who I went to film school with have become like huge A-list screenwriters now. Like David Koepp was there when I was there. He wrote Spider-Man and Jurassic Park and Panic.
Not bad.
Alexander Payne, who did Sideways and Election, and just probably like 10 other people who've really taken off. And the idea is that whoever makes it up to the top of the mountain first will then sort of reach out and sort of try to help the next person.
That's right, we're
up.
looking for the hand to
pull well, that's the thing you really get at film school, the relationships, and it echoes the business itself. I mean, so much is done just through relationships.
Almost sounds like business school. There's that kind of argument whether what you really get out of business school is a lot of it's the networking side,
Yeah,
so.
I mean, who you're going to call besides Ghostbusters, So yeah, but the book itself, it's intended to kind of give you, if you're an aspiring filmmaker who doesn't really know much about it other than seeing movies, it gives you kind of a primer. The emphasis is on screenwriting because that's my background, but there are lessons on lighting, sound, casting, directing, and a lot of little pieces of wisdom from different directors. And if you already are a filmmaker, it's a good reminder, because a lot of times once you start getting out into the world and working, you forget just some of the really just very basic essential things. And so a lot of professional colleagues said they want to.
As I told you before the show, a producer friend of mine who was actually just here doing another show told me that someone in the business mentioned it to her. Said, "Oh, there's this great book," and then she heard I was going to have you on the show. So
everyone has to have this book.
Yeah,
everyone on the
you're not just saying that because you wrote it.
No.
But I did read it, and what I thought might be fun was just to kind of pull out some of these examples that you've got here in the book, and it's a quick read too. By the way, I like this kind of a format. I mean, it makes it very digestible. So let's see. I'm going to reach in here. Where does my magic finger end up? I'm on give your characters the anonymity test, which is number 41.
Well, a lot of times what happens, and so much of what went into the book is sort of the intersection between my professional experiences writing for like 23 years and then teaching for so many years. And what I find is a lot of students in their scripts, all their characters can start to sound alike, and it's a very common thing early on. Like you get the voice of one character, and then everybody sounds exactly the same.
And do the characters all sound like the author? You know what I mean? Like
very often,
it's all them.
Very often that's also true. And so the idea is that if you cover up the name of the character who's speaking, you should be able to read any line and be able to tell who's speaking without it actually saying, Gregory Neil, that we would have a different just a different rhythm in our language, different vocabulary, different education level, different accents. So that's basically what that means. Take out the character names and see if you know who's talking, and if they all sound alike, I mean, if you don't know and you can't tell, then they're all too similar, and you have to heighten somebody's voice, make somebody more distinctive.
All right. Do you think is that a problem in the big movies that do make it to screen, by the way, or do you think they get past that?
Well, part of it, the difference between a script that you're going to read and a produced film, so probably by the time it gets produced, the casting director has found very idiosyncratic actors to play the roles, and the actors have made them their own. Even if they were similar on the page, the actor at that point has owned it. But there's a lot of people forget that before a movie can ever get made, first people have to read the script, and the script itself has to come alive for them to then pass it to the next person up the food chain, to the person who can actually say yes and green light the movie. And that's a long list of people.
Oh yeah, and it's amazing, of course you hear this, but it's so true that, or I hear from so many people that you know, what it takes to make a big feature to get it done. And even when you have somebody like Spielberg or something behind it,
yeah.
I mean, it can still take like 10 years to get a movie made. And, you know, even when there's all the money in the world, either it's just, you know, and the scripts go through so many changes. And what do you think of all the rewrites? I'm just, since you're a screenwriter, so I don't know which number it is in the book, if it's in the book.
I probably don't either.
But what, again, you know, the script, sometimes so many people are involved in writing. You know, in other words, you hear about writing by committee, that usually you think that's not a good idea. Is that good or bad to have so many different writers involved?
Well, I think the revision process is, you know, just essential. I mean, before, on a spec script, which would be a script that I just wrote on my own as opposed to a commissioned script or an assignment, on a spec script where I have as much time as I need before giving it to my agent or manager to go out into the marketplace, I would say I do an average of 15 drafts from the very first one. And people always say, well, what are those drafts, you know, in between? Well, you know, a few of them are just rough drafts. They're my drafts. They're probably too long. There's a lot of fat on them. Then the next step is I give the script to a trusted advisor or two, who are usually writer friends, and it's a quid pro quo thing. We trade scripts with each other.
Trash each other's work.
Yes. Well, you have to be really careful. It's like the early drafts you want to give to the really nurturing person who's just going to be like, you know, well, first of all, you know, I love your writing and I love everything you do, and you know, and they'll be kind, because if you give it to the really harsh, very blunt, critical person, and those are usually the people who are the busiest and they're working and they don't have a lot of time, and so they're just going to cut right to, all right, thanks for reading, a lot of good stuff here. Let's talk about all the problems. And so I try to...
But yet it's interesting how often you really do learn from that. For instance, I was just showing somebody something I edited, and it's always nice to get the, you know, good job, whatever comments, and hopefully there was some truth to it, or, you know, it makes you feel good. But on the other hand, when people had specific suggestions and said, oh, well, you know, what if you changed this here, or if you did that, it was actually more useful to me in a way to actually get specific suggestions instead of just that kind of...
It's fantastic. I mean, they always, you know, there's a line about, I think Truman Capote said, you know, when there's a writer in the room, there's always a thief, you know, in the premises. Because you do, I mean, you don't necessarily attribute the notes that you get. If somebody gives you a funny line of dialogue or a little tweak or move this here, I'll take anything that's useful. It's my name on the title page. And a big part of being a screenwriter is being able to filter all of those comments and decide which ones are good, which ones are bad.
Sure.
And usually you're looking for a consensus. If one person gives you a note that's just really against what you were thinking, you might, you know, just want to say, well, that's not the movie I'm writing. But if several people say, you know, I really wanted to see that scene played out, and then it's something to really look at. There's also very often the note under the note. They might give you the note where they'll say, you know, I didn't really believe this would ever happen. It didn't seem credible. And sometimes that's not really... You're addressing sort of a backstory issue with the character in terms of the character's sense of education. Maybe that you didn't set up that they were an expert and that they would know these things, and it just sort of comes out of the blue, for example. And if the scene that they're having a problem with may not be a problem, that particular scene may be fine if you just lay in a scene earlier that kind of motivates and makes that, you know, accurate. The other thing that I find is I love getting very specific page notes. The worst kind of notes is when you give a script to somebody and it's either structural or where they say, okay, let's just have sort of a general conversation about sort of the overall concept. You know, like where they're giving you this huge conceptual thing. They're not even, and the analogy I'll use is like golf. You know, the idea with a script is you want to keep getting the ball closer and closer to the hole.
Sure.
It's very rare that any screenwriter, no matter how experienced, hits a hole in one. It's almost never. But if you get it on the green, then every rewrite you're getting it closer, closer, closer. Sometimes you get notes where you're in the sand trap. You know, you're not on the green at all. The writing by committee question, depending on the kind of movie. Like I just finished working on, I did a page 1 rewrite of an animated movie that's coming out in 2012. That was a little bit of committee writing, and a lot of the bigger comedies and animated movies are, because there's so many layers and gags, and it just seems like it's a big sort of melting pot where there's a lot of voices that go into it, and usually there's a very strong vision of the director and the visual style of the movie. And animated movies are actually, look, I've seen the whole movie already, and I'm still writing it. They do animatics, which are like the crude drawings, almost like storyboards. And so the director and the visual artists, and in this case it's based on children's books, there's source material, it's branded, So a lot of times there'll be a lot more writers on animated movies. There'll be a bunch of teams who do it, and sometimes that'll improve the product. But a smaller, more personal movie, I think that can really detract from the vision of the original voice and the original writer. And then I think it can be sort of the too many cooks syndrome, where they actually drafts get worse instead of better.
We'll be right back with Neil Landau. His book is 101 Things I Learned in Film School. And we are back with Neil Landau. His book is 101 Things I Learned in Film School. I was just curious, I know this wasn't quite where you were going with it, but when you mentioned having other people give you notes and ideas, is there a risk of getting sued later on? You know, you write the next Batman or Avatar, and all of a sudden everybody decides that, hey, he used my line, I deserve a piece of that.
Usually, I always recommend people, even if it's just in a synopsis stage or an outline, you can register the work with the Writers Guild of America West. You go to wga.org and you register it. It doesn't copyright it, but what it does is it establishes a date of completion. And then if anybody stole your idea from you, you could arbitrate and you would actually have a strong case. In terms of people giving you feedback and stuff like that, I mean, it happens all the time where somebody suggests a line or even a large subplot that you end up using, and I've never had a problem with that. But success tends to bring people out of the woodwork.
Well, I always say that success has many parents, but failure has, nobody owns a failure. That was their movie. But as soon as then everybody played a part in the success.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually, I can't go into specifics about it, but I'm actually going through something like this right now with somebody trying to say, hey, I need to have a little piece of this. And, so it does happen.
Welcome to Hollywood.
Yes. I mean, I've had a few different agents over the years, and I've had a couple of different managers. But I've always had a lawyer on retainer. Like
which number is that?
It's not in there.
Number 1, get a lawyer.
Get a lawyer. It's just they get 5. She gets 5% of what when I make money. So it's peace of mind.
Is it just contingency? There's no fee basis.
It's when I make money, she makes money. It's like an agent only. But and it's not in the book either. But it was one of the lessons that just didn't make it in there.
See, today we're going to tell you the things that aren't in the book.
Yeah, exactly. No, but never sign anything without having a lawyer look it over. Because when you're trying to break in, people are so eager, and they'll do anything, and they trust people they probably shouldn't trust. And I just think, there's a reason contracts exist, and you want to make sure you get paid, and it's
This town is full of sharks, so get a lawyer.
Have a lawyer. That should be lesson number 1. Have a lawyer.
The other thing I want to ask you, as a screenwriter, not to degrade the profession, whatever I'm trying to say, but
sometimes those are the same thing. Depression and profession.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a lot of respect for writers. I mean, I studied English lit in college and all of that, and where I came from, you think of novelists. I mean, you think of great writers, and there's a lot of respect for that. But yet, in the film industry, sometimes it seems like the writer is the bottom of the totem pole. And that the director, the actors, everybody throw their weight around, and the writers are expendable, or there are 100 rewrites, whatever. So, any comments on that? I mean, is it?
No, there's a big difference between how a writer is treated in television versus film.
Good point.
It's one of the lessons, and it's one of the reasons I segued into TV. TV is a writer's medium, and generally a showrunner, who would be one of the executive producers of the show, is usually a writer who is making producerial decisions, and the writers hire the directors in television. In television, a director comes in almost like a guest stint. They'll direct an episode and then they move on, and then another director will come in, every few weeks. Some shows, occasionally there'll be a show like a sitcom, like where the same director directs almost every episode. But most 1-hour drama shows. So in television, writers have great respect. We're paid very, we're compensated because it becomes your life, because you're prepping, shooting, and posting an episode. It never stops. It's like the I Love Lucy episode with the chocolates on the conveyor belt.
I didn't see that, but...
Well, it's like the conveyor belt starts off, and all she has to do is, put the candy and move on to the next one, and then they speed up the conveyor belt, and it's like, and...
Sounds like this show, actually.
It's exactly like this show. And movies, Yeah, I mean, the whole business can be very political, but movies, if you get along well with the director's going to call all of the shots. If the director is happy with the rewrites you're doing, and there's always rewrites, because even if you sell the script and the studio's happy, as soon as the director comes in, the director's going to want to put his or her stamp on it, and they're going to have their notes. Then the actors come in. Generally the bigger wattage of the star, the more notes they're going to have about their character.
Sure.
Not always, sometimes they sign on and they're just really happy with it. So in a movie, if the screenwriter isn't delivering, you'll be out. I've never been fired from a movie job, but television, what they do is they just don't pick up your option.
Oh.
If they don't think it's a good fit, and sometimes it's not. One of the jobs I had was on The Magnificent Seven. It was a Western on CBS. It took place in the 1870s. And the woman who was running the head writer had worked with me, and she liked me, but she said, "Do you think you can write cowboys in the 1870s?" And I said, "Honestly, I don't really know. It's not really my thing." And she said, "Well, I really want you in the room to help break story anyway." And, but that was not a good fit for me. I was miserable writing for one cowboy, let alone 7. And so
watch a lot of westerns. I don't know. What do you do?
I did. That's what you do. You research. I watched westerns. I read books. I felt like I've written so many things that I didn't think I could write until I started to research. I wrote a pilot for CBS about the witness protection program, and by the end, I did research for about a year, and I became an expert on the witness protection program. And
is that one lesson? Be flexible and kind of go. Sometimes it's maybe, what you're hired for and not what you're. Well, obviously you like writing, but I mean not what you're passionate. But maybe it's not your dream project, but it's the project.
Yeah.
And so.
I think that because it's so competitive, you find that people either get pigeonholed or they find their niche. And so a sci-fi writer is going to be known. They're going to be branded, and they're the person they're going to go to for sci-fi writing. Sometimes, so after Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, which was the first movie I had made. Everything was a teen comedy, teen comedy, high school, and I was very young when I did that movie, and there's the both true and false assumption that if you're, in your early 20s, you have your pulse much more on what high school students want to see, and you know how to write for them, and you know how to capture the language and the jargon. So that's, some of that's true. I mean, I worked on an MTV series called Undressed when I was in my
Undressed,
20s.
okay.
Undressed, it was...
Was it as racy as it sounds?
It was it was somewhat racy. MTV's much racier now. When I did it,
they were actually dressed. Now these days they aren't.
Exactly. There's this new show on MTV now about a high school kid who has a large... Have you heard about this show?
No, actually, but
It's about a high school kid who... during a basketball game, his shorts accidentally fall down, and he's totally exposed, and he's very well endowed, and he becomes like this. His whole life changes in high school. Like, everybody views him differently, and it's very racy. And they even use words that I probably can't use right now on MTV.
I'll have to bleep you.
Yeah, those George Carlin. This is the words you can't say on television. They were using one quite frequently. So. I don't even remember the question now. I've gone 10,
well, this is good.
10 steps, I've gone 10 steps past it.
I was just thinking of the show. I don't know. I'll have to research it later.
Yeah. Things are, I think, I don't remember.
Well, that's okay, because we are scheduled here for break. So we will be right back with Neil Landau. His book is 101 Things I Learned in Film School. We'll be right back. And we are back with Neil Landau. His book is 101 Things I Learned in Film School. Well, I like the fact that in your title, you're professor of film, television, and new media, or I think or the School of Film, Television, and New Media, if that's the actual name. I love the fact that they have new media in there, because I really think the internet, if you're watching this show on YouTube, baby, that is not only a game changer, but just the future, I think, in so many ways.
Well, when I went to film school, pretty much your only options, you could write a screenplay and hope you could sell it to a studio, or you could make a short film, which there were I think, Sundance Film Festival was It was just starting. I mean, now it's huge, but now there's tons more film festivals.
Oh, there's a film festival in every town in the country has a film festival.
But now, students can distribute their own content on YouTube. You can shoot on HD. When I made my first films, it was on Super 8 and 16 millimeter. You actually had film stock, and
wow. Well, back
you
when
were
the film
cutting.
Was film.
You were cutting. You were using. I mean, it was. Now you're on Final Cut Pro. You can distribute yourself. I've had students who have had. They make these really funny kind of SNL kind of shorts that are on Funny or Die.
Oh yeah,
Funny or Die has now sold to HBO. Lisa Kudrow has a web series called Web Therapy that has sold to Showtime now. So some of it is they incubate on sort of a small, as sort of web episodes, and then in some cases they're getting more traditional distribution.
I like that idea.
Definitely. And one of my students, an MFA director from UCLA, he created his own TV series called Central Division. It's on the web. It's 2 to 4 minute episodes. Each episode, I think they cost him about $700 to make each episode versus like $5 million or more for Grey's Anatomy per episode. So quite a disparity.
A little different budget there.
So 2 to 4 minute episodes. Each one cliffhangs. And then the next one starts up direct pickup right where the last one left off. When you put them all together into a contiguous narrative, you have a 90-plus minute you have a movie.
Wow.
And then he can either sell it direct to DVD, or some of these are released overseas as feature films in theaters. So, that's a totally new thing.
And even some of the options, I think YouTube now lets you rent. So you can actually put something on, and for instance, some of the documentaries, they did this during award season, like The Cove and stuff. You could, like pay-per-view kind of thing on YouTube.
Right.
So there actually was additional revenue stream. It wasn't necessarily you just putting it free on YouTube. You could charge people to watch it.
And if you see people anywhere from, God, it's even getting younger now, probably like 6 years old, 7 years old through 30, they're much more on their iPhones and their devices.
Did you see, I don't know if you saw this, there was a video on YouTube showing a 2-year-old or 2.5-year-old kid using an iPad. The most unbelievable thing. Just sitting there playing with that thing, and I thought, my God, this is really the future here.
Right.
Because you can see, 2 years old using the iPad like a pro.
Like an Etch-a-Sketch. Remember when we do that and then you'd shake it? Now it's the iPad. Yeah, it's kind of, you hear both sides of the story. Some people say, the movie industry is in crisis, and the box office this summer is off, and it's getting more and more expensive to produce movies.
Oh, is it because I thought with Avatar it was probably all these 3D movies that it was probably going?
It's not off to a great start right now. DVD sales are definitely down, and one of on the negative column is piracy is rampant, and
the downside of the internet.
Yeah, that's a big
DVDs.
problem. I think that technologically that will get solved soon. There'll be ways that things can be, piracy protected.
They're lucky with me because I'm one of those people, I enjoy going to the movies theater. I don't watch much TV, but I love going to the movies. And number one, I won't really sit and watch a movie on the computer, but number two, I'm not going to watch a low quality copy of the movie.
Right.
Like with a camera, that's not doing it for me. I want to be in the movie theater with the 3D glasses on, looking at,
Right.
So they're lucky. If everybody were like me, there wouldn't be much piracy because I won't even watch the...
Well, but that's why more, for better or worse, the studios are trying to do more event kind of movies that are like extremely visual, where you feel like I have to be in the theater to get that experience, like Avatar or Alice in Wonderland. Whereas the indie movie is what's really in trouble right now, because you don't really need to see it in a movie theater if you don't want to. I'd still always prefer that, but if it's just, like the typical sort of Woody Allen size movie that I grew up with, or the movie, a lot of those kinds of character-based movies, or like, Juno, Little Miss Sunshine, a lot more. It used to be that it was a stigma to go straight to DVD or video, and now I think that's going to become much more common, where a lot of things will just go straight to, well, I think the DVD will become like the 8-track soon. I think everything will just be, you'll just
digital
electronic, you'll just digitally download, and so I think for a while, the indie movie right now is going through a little bit of a kind of a desert and I think that will shift back again, and let's hope so, because those are my favorite kind of movies.
Well, they're usually the best.
Yeah.
And at least, even the Oscars, I think, have been doing a better job when you look at, it was Hurt Locker versus Avatar, and, the little,
Look what happened.
little movie,
Well, that was personal, too, because you had well,
wasn't it great?
James
Yeah.
Cameron and Catherine Bigelow. Hurt Locker was my favorite movie of the season, and for the very reason, there's a lesson in the book that says every movie is a suspense movie. So no matter what genre you're writing in, even comedy, the audience needs to be filled with anticipation of what's going to happen next. And Hurt Locker for me, you know, I could not relax. I was worried the entire movie that, you know, I mean, I was right on the razor's edge of life and death, and that movie was extremely successful for that reason.
You know, these aren't things I think that are necessarily in the book, but along that line, I was thinking of something, you know, I see a few trends in Hollywood, and I wondered what you think of this, that number one, you know, it seems like these days a lot of the movies, most of the movies, the big movies, not the indies, where you still get quality, but, you know, you tend to get the comic book movies, the sequel movies, the cartoon character, you know what I mean?
Television series.
Yeah, the old TV series. The
Yeah.
remakes of the old movies or the remakes of the TV series. It's funny, TV used to be a step down from the movies, and now it's the source of all the movies.
Yes,
so,
I know.
But any thoughts on kind of that recycled thing?
I understand why they do it, because obviously, in many cases, it costs more to market a movie than to make a movie, you know? But it's depressing, in my opinion, because, you know, I want originality. I want to see something new, you know. And part of the argument the studios can make is a lot of these TV shows are new to the young generation. You know, like they're doing I Dream of Jeannie, I think, next.
Yeah.
They already did Bewitched.
But you know what's funny though? Yeah, like Bewitched was awful from what I remember.
Yeah.
And you know what's weird is they take, like I say, TV used to be a step down from the movies, but now they take like an old, well, even like. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of Charlie's Angels. I mean, I actually like the TV series better.
Yeah.
So I think they take like maybe a B TV series and turn it into a C or a D movie, and I think, what does that mean? And they've got a budget, but they're actually doing like, or like say Bewitched was just an awful.
That was a misfire.
Version
Yeah.
of.
They would have been much better if Nora Ephron did the Bewitched movie. I think that was a case where she thought too much outside of the box, because I think if it just was much more of a straight adaptation, it would have worked. It kind of. I mean, it's too
Then you
long.
see something like Star Trek, where they actually came in,
wonderful.
and I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so I thought they did a great job with
J.J. Abrams
going back
can
to
do
the
no
original.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just shows that just because something is popular and sort of in the zeitgeist where they can market it really easily, and there's a built-in awareness of, you know, that it was something as opposed to just starting from scratch. I mean, even the A-Team, I don't know how many people from the young, you know, from the 18 to 35-year-old demographic are even aware of the A-Team with Mr. T, and, you know.
I've interviewed Stephen J. Candle, I know him, so we actually had him on the show about the A-Team. So I mean, and I didn't watch it when I was growing up, but it was on. I mean, I was definitely aware of it, and I always remember him sitting at the typewriter, and, you know, I've seen a lot of his series, but...
Yeah, what I hope, although I'm not terribly optimistic that will be true, but I would hope just for, you know, creating new franchises at the very least, you know, creating new characters. Like the animated movie I just worked on, it's based on books, and this character could be in, there could be lots of sequels of this movie. So of course, when you're part of that ride,
Oh yeah, it's a nice
it's a
ride
good
to
thing,
be
but at
on.
least it's a new character. I mean, Iron Man was exciting to me because it was sort of, it was a much more obscure character
Yeah,
that I wasn't
there's a
aware
case
of.
where I was not a fan of the comic, and even in some ways, truthfully, not necessarily even huge fans of the actors, but I just thought they did a great job. And I mean, nothing against Robert Downey Jr., but I just never thought of him as an action hero, and there he was. He did a great job in that movie.
I thought that was probably the best one of the recent crop. I thought Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man, was also very good. You know,
I guess the question is whether or not there'll be a fourth one, or what's happening.
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry, we are out of time, but I wanted to thank you very much, Neil Landau. His book is 101 Things I Learned in Film School. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time. We're going to send you a tuition bill.